Hi.
Hello, hello, hello. All right.
Like morning. Greg.
Hi, morning.
Hey, hey.
Hello, hello.
So everyone is unmuted and good to go.
Yeah, man.
Yes, we are.
Ready.
I think we're waiting.
Morning.
We're waiting
Morning.
on the host, Dr.
Okay.
Strawn. All right. And everyone's volume is good.
Yeah, man.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, everyone can
Yeah,
hear
yeah.
Yep.
We inside.
Perfect. All righty. All right. Hello, Trinidad and Tobago.
Hello, Bahamas.
Hello.
Hey, Brendan.
Hello.
Hey, Brendan.
Hello,
Morning.
hello. Hey, Brandon.
Brandon.
Family.
Morning.
All right.
Morning.
Is that Tristan? Brendan Lakai, boy. Boom bang. Tristan Wallace.
All right. So we have another, 8 minutes
All right.
before we start.
All right. Okay, cool. Nobody had no PowerPoint and them thing, right?
Nah.
No.
Yeah.
Cantilia. All right, good, nice.
Yeah.
In a gear.
I have a couple backup pictures in case things.
All right. Things get nice.
Yeah, better.
Good. Wait, no, so everybody has pictures now?
No, I do have.
Well,
No,
if,
no,
not,
no.
well if nobody else have pictures, I wouldn't show the pictures.
Things get nice.
If I set up pictures, then I short. Let me flow.
Yeah. We just go through it. Yeah.
Let me flow.
If you do
If it
pictures,
happen-
Well, last night, Cantia said she did have some pictures, didn't she? Was she
Yeah, but-
changed her mind?
we got
After much consideration,
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I think it's a discussion. I think, we vibing off each other. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
do what we do best. We will talk.
Just gonna make this nice.
Yeah.
and if Louis put up any pictures, we go finish tomorrow.
Yeah.
I have plenty. I had too much, and to select them now is a whole meeting.
Listen.
Pictures and video.
Yeah, man. Craig,
Hey. Yes, sir.
if we go Marvin, Cantilia, Michael, Michelle, that's what we just say, right? Guys? Michael,
Yeah.
Michelle, and Louis. Would that be good for you? Well,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
God, for the moderator.
Yes, of course.
All right, okay, cool.
Awesome.
Good. Right? So it's just right down the road. Boom bang.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right.
Right.
Let's see how the participants list will grow.
Yeah.
Hi, Sophia.
Wait, Sophia inside? Graves?
Yeah, I seen
Hi,
Sophia inside, so I
Sophie.
saying hi.
Some extra light.
Which Sophia? Which Sophia is that?
Yeah, Graves from Barbados.
From Pinelands.
I can tell you, Sophia from Lucia. Okay.
No.
Okay.
No, that's my Sophia. Thank you.
All right. Yes. That's Michelle Sophia.
Oh, I almost going to say our.
Well, you know, Louis, you probably know Sophia before me, so I think we
Yeah,
could take
we
names.
have nice connections with
Malik.
oh yeah, with Pine and Pine. Oh, they muted,
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
answer. But thank you, Sophie.
Yeah.
So wait, Sophie, what happened? I ain't get no special good morning?
Oh God.
Who else we have inside?
I heard from Zara. She has a power outage.
Oh, geez, in
Wow.
Antigua.
Yes, Antigua. So I'm not sure what's happening with them there. It seems to be, part of the island. So hopefully things will be up and she'll be able to join us. But she said she'll be recording.
The last time I checked, there were about 80 something, 90 people.
Okay.
So
All right.
I expect that it'll grow as
Yeah.
it goes on.
Nice.
Okay. Yeah, man. Tiffany Fagan. Oh, good. Look, Almal joined the party.
Oh,
Yeah,
Mal.
man.
Mali. It's feeling like one big CCFA reunion right now.
What is that?
Look at that. Look, Rishon and Chantel.
Christian and Chantel in the party.
All right.
Up here.
Roma.
I think our host is coming on in just now.
Okay.
Yes, I see Roma Spencer in.
Hey, Rooms.
Roma Spencer, morning.
They can't answer, but you know they're there.
Okay. Yeah, man.
Adi boy. Adi.
Lisha Jean-Paul St. George from St. Lucia. Good morning.
Lisa, Alicia there? Hey,
Morning rooms.
hey, Alicia.
But what is going on here? In a few minutes.
All righty. I'm sure Dr. Strawn is gonna be right with us. Let's just give it one more minute. I see Dr. Nicolette Bethel is in the meeting, so maybe we can call on her to pinch hit if Dr. Strawn doesn't show up. She's cursing me under her breath now. But you love me, Nicolette. It'll be fine. I can take a little cuss from you. It's all right.
Yeah. Craig, can you unmute Michelle, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, Dr. Strawn is here. You have to unmute yourself, Ian. We can't hear you. There you go.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, hey.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm having a somewhat chaotic moment here. It's good to see all of you. And Craig, some information you sent me that I was able to open before, I am unable to open right now.
Aha.
Okay. Marvin is muted as well.
So,
Regarding our presenters.
Marvin said he's muted.
okay.
Yeah, man. All right, good. Good. I'm back inside now.
You know,
Okay.
WhatsApp it to me maybe, or send it to me as just in an email.
Yeah, let me send that to you. Just a minute, folks. Give us just a second again. You know, technology.
Maklaho, big up yourself.
I was able to open it on my Mac, but can't on this PC.
Okay. Give me 2 seconds.
Morning, Pat. Morning, morning.
And Craig,
You could just do a quick register on the thing, you'll get it.
All right. In.
hi, Danny.
Hey, Danny. Morning,
Hi, Danny.
morning.
Morning. Good morning, Danny.
Hey, Danny.
Hey, Danny.
You may not be able to respond, but you can type.
Mark Laveau.
Mark Laveau, boy.
Mark Laveau.
It's a family reunion.
I'm telling you. Hi, Pat.
Listen, and Marvin, you were saying that you all had an order that you prefer, correct?
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
Ready for me, Craig?
Yeah, I sent you just now.
Are you sending me the
Email.
Yes, received. Okay. All right, I think we're ready to begin then. We only lost 5 minutes due to my incompetence. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, man.
Good
Good
afternoon,
afternoon.
Ian.
Wonderful to be here to meet you all and be a part of this conversation about something that I am very passionate about. The program today is brought to you in conjunction with the School of English Studies at the University of Bahamas, where students can earn a bachelor's in English and specialize in creative writing, Bahamian and Caribbean literature, film and drama studies, or linguistics. English majors enjoy small classes, have the opportunity to participate in student publications and internships, and are prepared to take advantage of the many opportunities for creative professionals that place a premium on advanced writing skills. The Blue Flamingo Festival is a wonderful event, and I'm pleased to be a part of it. It's exciting. I commend my brother Craig Smith and Marie Sersing and all the others who are playing an integral part in this event and making it a wonderful success, bringing together writers from our region, exposing our students and our community to all of the beauty and excellence which our Caribbean region has to offer. And today, I'll be host. My name is Ian Strawn. I am a playwright, filmmaker, and a professor at the University of the Bahamas. And I'll be your moderator today for this panel on Caribbean theater, setting the stage for the future. And I want to introduce the panelists, and then I'll ask them to actually just say a brief, 3 or 5 minutes about themselves, where they hail from, and the work that they're doing, and then we'll get into the meat of our discussion. But our panelists, and forgive me if I mispronounce, please correct me. Michelle Hinkson Cox from Barbados Community College, Cantilia Lewis from Sir Arthur Lewis Community College, St. Lucia, Lewis McWilliams, University of West Indies, St. Augustine, Michael Sherry, the University of Trinidad and Tobago, and Marvin George, the Edna Madney College of the Visual and Performing Arts. I hope I did not do any violence
Not too much.
to the names. Very good. I'd like us to just go around and have you just say a few words about yourself and the work you're doing to get us started. Who would like to begin? Michelle?
Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. As Ian said, I'm from Barbados. But I do have to say, in terms of my theater history, I'm very much from Trinidad. I'm not going to get away if I don't say that, but I would have started my theater training here in Barbados at the Barbados Community College, where I now work. But the really significant part of my development in theater would have happened with the time that I spent in Trinidad, both as a student and as a lecturer practitioner. From there, I went on to Goldsmiths, University of London, where I studied applied theater. Yay, Patrice! And again, the study of applied theater came out of my time with Arts in Action in Trinidad. That's where the interest started. And now I'm back in Barbados, and I am a playwright, producer, educator, apparently an academic. I'm still trying to accept that one. But I'm a practitioner here and the coordinator of the theater arts program here at Barbados Community College.
Excellent. Who would like to go next? Let's see who I'm going to pick on. Cantilia, is that correct?
Yes, Cantilia. Wow, got it correct on the first try. I'm very happy about that. So I consider myself to be a Trini-Lucian, just like Michelle. A great part of my theater development happened in Trinidad, the CFA. And from there, came back to St. Lucia and worked with the Cultural Development Foundation here, and then also the Ministry of Education. I have, in terms of my studies, I've gone on to do a program with University of Birmingham in terms of culture and identity. And so right now I do a lot of work with the Folk Research Center. I'm the deputy chair there. And I'm also very happy to be with Sir Arthur Lewis Community College with our newly formed division of digital humanities, new media and creative industries. And really helping to develop the program that we have here for our students.
Thank you. Our next panelist, Louis, is that correct?
Louis.
Louis, I wondered.
Yeah, Louis.
I wondered.
Yeah, Cantilia Louis too. Yeah. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. I'm Louis McWilliams, and I operate now out of the Department for Creative and Festival Arts at UB St. Augustine. as the head of department and the coordinator of the theater arts program. And I feel like a serious elder in this panel. Maybe I am, because I would have taught everyone in the panel at some point during the UB time, you know. Yeah, I'm a still a practicing practitioner. Still working very hard in the field, and you're going to hear more about me and the work that our department is doing during this time. And I know we have lots of people here who are out of the department, and we've been proud because we are able to spread our wings throughout the Caribbean and throughout the world. So I'll just pause there and talk more when it comes down to me. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Good to meet you, Louis. Michael Sherry, is that pronounced correctly? Or is it Cherry?
Yes, it's correct. It could be pronounced Sherry if you're more French inclined, or Cherry if you're, strictly British kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, hey, that's the Caribbean, yo. That's yeah, Anglophone, Francophone, Hispanicophone, whatever. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Cherry. I am an actor. I'm not ashamed to say that I'm an actor in the Caribbean. It's a tough racket, but yeah. I am also a director. I'm an acting coach and acting teacher. And I guess my day job is assistant professor of acting at University of Trinidad and Tobago's Academy for the Performing Arts. I've been an actor. Geez, hey, this year will be 30 years I in this thing professionally, yo. 30 years. Wow. I guess if you count since 35. Wow. Okay. No, seriously. So yeah, I've been at this thing. I've been working in theater for a pretty long time. I trained both in the United States, did my MFA in acting at the National Theatre Conservatory, the Denver Center for the Performing Arts. I did my BA at UWI in film production with a minor in theater arts. So the film program, which is fairly new at the time. I mean, still is new. And my minor studies at the DCFA. Right now, we're dealing with a fairly young program at UTT, Academy for Performing Arts. We just turned 10 years old, and we're still coming out gangbusters, but we're still we're dealing with restructuring and new challenges that are facing theater right now, especially in this pandemic world. But I mean, I will get more into this stuff UTT's Academy for the Performing Arts offers, and yeah, I mean, I was taught by Louis and Danny, and worked with Patrice and Brendan and Camille and Marvin and Mark, so it's good to be among some familiar faces and energies here. It makes me feel a little less nervous about this panel of august esteemed academic artists.
Thank you,
from
Michael.
the Caribbean. But oh yeah, you too you too, Ian. You too.
That wasn't my point. I still have one more to introduce. Marvin, please.
Yeah, man. All right. Good afternoon. If there's anybody to George, I currently serve as the Dean of the School of Drama at Namani College of the Visual and Performing Arts in Jamaica. My training comes formally out of the Department of Creative and Festival Arts, which used to be the Center for Creative and Festival Arts, and before that, the Creative Arts Center at UWI St. Augustine. That's where I was. That's where I was formally trained with an undergrad in theatre arts. And yes, Louis is my teacher. So is Danny Lindsay. I see and also inside here Roma Spencer tuning in. I had Roma Spencer also as a tutor, because she directed plays at the center as well, that as a young person I would have been on. And then some of the people on this panel, colleagues, some people in the audience are also some of my students. So there's a sense of continuity and lineage and all kind of thing going on inside here. People like Michael Sherry and so on would have mentored me while I was on stage. He was just a few years ahead of me, right? You know, Michael, Mark Laveau, who is also in here, you know, and all the names that have already been mentioned. I've also after the work in Trinidad in the undergrad, and I have to mention also that I also come out of a community theatre background, right? That is Best Village, the Prime Minister's Best Village Trophy competition, which I suspect we will talk about as we go along. And then further to that, my further training is at the University of Leeds, for which I had a Commonwealth Scholarship to read an MA in Theatre and Development Studies. And then now, here in Jamaica, serving as the head of the School of Drama at Namani College, but at the same time, fighting up with a PhD, looking at performance and Caribbean culture and so on, right? But let me talk things, like things. Right?
Oh, well, it's wonderful to meet all of you. Quite an exciting group. And no mistake, I'm sure, that the University of the Bahamas is looking to make a step forward in this area. We have an opportunity to talk to you all about how we could advance this at our own campus and join you in the work you're doing. But I guess we'll begin with asking a question about the historical context for theater in your respective community. Tell us about how theater has evolved where you are. We have St. Lucia, Barbados, Trinidad, and Jamaica here in terms of the locations. Let's circle back to Michelle.
Yes. Y'all want to go in the order that we had before, or you want to?
Yes,
That's fine with me. Don't mind me, who doesn't know what he's doing. You go with the pre-agreed plan. I'll sit back and wait to ask questions.
That's fine. That's fine. All right. So
Who's first?
That's me going first, right, guys?
right, yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. Yeah, man, no problems. Yeah. I think the way we thought about framing this journey that we're going to make in each of us telling our stories is by laying down a kind of with a broad brush what a conversation on theatre in the Caribbean might require of us, right? To start, I'm going to speak specifically to the School of Drama eventually, but going to lay a broad frame, which is part of our we've been over the last couple of days and then weeks, right? Perhaps almost a year. One, Rex Nuttleman says that there are perhaps more artists in the Caribbean, more artists per square inch or per square mile or something like that in the Caribbean that is perhaps good for us. I don't have the exact quote, but it's a place that I think we should start so that we could make sense of at once and the same time the ways in which programs have developed in our respective territories and the kinds of overlap that have been going on in the conversation so far with people talking about their backgrounds and so on, and everybody knowing everybody else, right? So that's one. Two is that in talking about theatre in the Caribbean, we can't have a conversation on theatre in the Caribbean or theatre in any one of our institutions without first attending to the history of the Caribbean or the history of the modern Caribbean, which is a recent history. It is a history that everybody begins with, and it's perhaps more urgent given the time that we're in, which is not so much about COVID, but what COVID has made urgent for us. which is about recognizing systemic inequalities and what that points to about our lives in the Americas. And that is the fact of the contact of a European plan of expansion that causes enslavement for certain peoples in this part of the world, and the resistance of those peoples to that enslavement and what is there, right? What emerges from that contact. That is something we've heard over and over and over, but as the basis for what Errol Hill, in Errol Hill's research as a theater researcher, I'm not talking about him here as a playwright or actor now, but as a researcher whose work in trying to read what the Caribbean has done or is or might be doing in its emerging or emergent theater is foundational to any conversation we might want to have. One, he wrote the Jamaica stage, and two, that he also wrote Emergence of a National Drama in the West Indies. So he lays out for us what, in an important way, all the things that have gone before that gives context to some of the things that we are doing at our institutions, right? And I just want to paint, as I said before, with a broad brush what it is, and then speak specifically to the school. If that history is understood and we accept it as the way forward, then what Hill is also saying is that coming out of that history, what you have for a couple hundred years in the Caribbean, for as long as it is plantation, and then colonized space, is a mass of population who might not be featured in the theater that the region is making, but a certain group of people who perpetuates a way of understanding theater or an understanding of theater or a theater product that is borrowed from somewhere else where they would have come from and settled here as colonizer or what have you, right? He argues further in his work that the theater that is emerging or emergent as the Caribbean theater only becomes a West Indian or a Caribbean theater when the mass of the population or the black mass of the population, and by black I don't only mean African, I mean literally the mass of the population, right, is placed on stage as protagonists and in a dignified way. And then he starts mapping, right? He starts mapping in his research where that might begin. He talks about, for example, C.L.R. James's work on the Black Jacobins as a critical starting point for a nation theatre. And then at the end of that important essay, that very seminal essay, he goes back and he says that perhaps, given the research he'd done after he put the full stop on the essay, that the work of Marcus Garvey might be critical to understanding the emerging theatre or the emergent theatre in the West Indies. That Garvey, in organizing the UNIA and the entertainments at Idlewild Park here in Kingston, would have been writing plays to extend his message to communities, right? Apart from the newspaper, he was doing that. He talks as well about the link between, he talks about Una Marson, and Una Marson's work as an activist probably also extends to her work as a playwright, right? So he talks then about a beginning, right? That is rooted in a people that is involved in a self-defining, right? And then putting themselves in their art consciously, purposefully, deliberately. He goes on to talk, for example, and again, broad brushes. That's the people, if I don't call your name, please, we could bring it up in the conversation as we go, because again, there are more artists per square mile than is perhaps good for us. That's what Metroford said. Around the 50s, there was something emerging in Jamaica that's called well known as the Jamaican pantomime. All right? But around the 50s and into the 60s, the pantomime itself is changing because it begins as a kind of theater product, usually running at Christmas time and extending itself for a couple of months of the year, presenting tales that are of European stock. But then some people come and interfere with it. The people who interfere with it largely are Ranny Williams, who was an actor with Marcus Garvey, right? And Miss Lou, who worked alongside Ranny Williams, and who, as we know, is in very many ways celebrated as the mother or the person who is the main advocate through performance and all of her work as the voice that affirms the presence of a Jamaican tongue, a nation language, and popularizes it in her art for all of us to receive. Oliver Samuels, because I just want to call names now, right? Oliver Samuels. In the 70s, once we start doing something called Carifesta, when Carifesta is finished in Jamaica, there's an idea that the activities that are happening on the ground, form the basis for the organizing of these schools of art that were around in Kingston. And then they come together on a spot of land in New Kingston that is today called the Edna College of the Visual and Performing Arts, but inside of it is a school called the School of Drama, that is formerly the Jamaica School of Drama, that is really birthed out of that Carrie Festa contact, the ex-Nettleford research as well, of the importance of establishing tertiary level training in the arts, right, in Jamaica, and then of course by merits of it at the time being a center or a hub for the wider Caribbean, because there are also many Caribbeans who have walked through this campus and have pushed out in the same way that we see in the Creative Arts Center, the CFA connections, and we'll talk about that. The school itself is home to some of the major names of the 70s and 80s, Sistering Theatre Collective, and the work of popular theatre in the community. And that is deliberate to say that because that has to speak to other things that will come up in this conversation about applied theatre and popular theatre and so on. It is also home to two ancestor heads, Carol Dawes and Dennis Scott, who is remembered in many ways as its founding head, and Carol Dawes, who at the forming of the School of Drama had a very critical role to play, but whose spirit, in terms of how, none of these people I've ever met. I've read about them, I've heard about them, but we know who they are through the testimonies about their work. And so I'm testifying what I think I know about their work from what I've heard. In Carol Dawes' work is the impulse to attend to festival aesthetics in the making of the theatre. And she formed something I think called the Jamaica Festival Theatre Company or something of the which. I'll get the correct name and share in the chat later on. And she is critical to the shaping of the courses and so on, the first set of courses that will form what emerges as the Jamaica School of Drama and then the School of Drama at Edna College. And then of course is Dennis Scott, who is a who as poet, playwright, and also dancer with Rex Nettleford's National Dance Theatre Company of Jamaica, and as well a director, and then an actor, becomes its first functioning head.
persons like Anthea Octave, Shane Sherry, Jason Butler Joseph. And it was important because what it did now was, again, that whole group of persons who went there, one, it opened their eyes to what was possible. Two, that was the beginning of the connection with actually the CFA, Creative Arts Center, because that love and that ignite, you know, Trinidad was alive and magical, etc. And then the college, again, realizing the importance of, we were a student group and we were youth theater, and yet we were able to go out there and represent St. Lucia in such a fashion. And so out of that grouping, what happened was from Sir Arthur Lewis, you had, and some of the names I mentioned there, Anthea Octave is now with Edna Manley, Jason Joseph, he did his music degree with at St. Augustine, and he is now the curriculum officer for music. Myself, I went to St. Augustine and I became the theater arts curriculum officer. So out of that, you had all of this coming out, and we also now were able to, because we're looking at the 90s, by the 2000s and so forth, these persons like the Shane Sherry started organizations like Head Funk. We then linked up with other persons like Junior Frederick and so forth. And out of that grouping, you found a surge again of new companies coming out, new groupings coming to like the factory, etc., happening during that time in St. Lucia. What we found though is by the late 90s, 2000s, the number of theater groups started to dwindle. And a lot of that has to do with space. Space is very important. A lack of space always generally means that you find groups kind of die out or die down. During that time, we did have a few groups like Chekapesh continuing that popular theater idea, the Creole and so forth happening. But very importantly, what helped to have a resurgence during that time was, I have to mention Petronilla de Turville. I can't not mention Petronilla de Turville. And she at the time was the head of CAMDO at the Ministry of Education. And she now was the one who helped to start off what we had at the time. There was a summer program for young persons. So out of that came Spark, came the Walcott Street Festival, came the music festival. And at that time, persons like June Frederick, who was on board to help to develop the young persons there. Junior Frederick was there as well. And out of that now, you had a growth in the schools, in the secondary schools, because now there was a place, again, space, because connected to the Cultural Development Foundation, a space to grow. So while all this is happening, the Arthur Lewis's drama group is still going there. And so it starts to be something to look forward to eventually becoming if you're part of Sir Arthur, you know? So I think with all of that happening and the youth really starting to push where theater was going in St. Lucia, Sir Arthur then decided to start off its performance programs, its theater arts programs. So we do have a creative and performing arts and the creative industries and events management program that we run now out of our study humanities, new media and creative industries department. And what's important about that is that while now we have started with those programs, that drama group that started so long ago still was making an impact on the landscape, so much so that for the for Carrie Festa, which just happened in, was it 2019 in Trinidad, the national production which was selected was a play written by Sir Arthur students and performed as part of Sir Arthur's contribution to the Nobel Laureate Festival. And so we've seen that, and out of we've seen that the importance of making sure we have that incubator of that, or that ability to harness and to really develop our youth. And so when you look at Theatre in Solution now, most of the groups, again, as I said, there are some of the long-standing groups like Gemstone Productions, Checker Pace, and Suffrage Action Theatre. But the landscape are all youth, young groups such as Drama Can, Youth in Arts, Youth on Fire, Youth Spark. All of those groups come out of that educational bubble, or that, you know, incubator that we have. And that's how you have the development really happening where we are right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Quintilia. Who will jump in next?
Hi.
I think I'm, or Michelle? You're next?
No, you, Mike.
All right, yeah.
Michael.
Okay, cool. So yeah, looking at theater in Trinidad, seeing that we have two of us from Trinidad and Tobago, I guess we're gonna take it like in two parts. Yeah, but we're gonna do part two first. Kind of go back chronologically a bit. You know, Trinidad was actually different. So I'm gonna take it. Look at theater in Trinidad from the context of the commercial theater. I guess it's called legitimate theater, which is you know, a kind of crappy name, but I mean, I guess it is what it's called, you know, in the Western world, which really is a misnomer, because all theater is legitimate, you know, as we all know. But yeah, I guess the kind of the traditional commercial form. So I mean, I'll take that in the context of well, the first play I ever saw, which was a production of Snow Cone and the Seven Duendes, which was written, directed, and produced by Helen Camps. And this is when she had a company called Trinidad All Theatre Productions. And it was at the Little Carib Theatre, and Little Carib Theatre is the oldest theatre space in Trinidad and Tobago. You know, it's still going, founded by Beryl McBurney. I mean, of course, other significant theatre spaces are, of course, Queen's Hall, Naprima Bowl, and, you know, as of late, you know, Napa, Sapa, the Big Black Box, you know, in terms of what we call, you know, traditional, you know, commercial theater spaces. So yeah, Snow Cone and Seven Duendes, it was an original production. It followed a kind of pantomime feel, but again, original music by people like Roger Israel, and featured quite a bit of people that, you know, we know in the theater today, Joy Ryan, late Godfrey Seeley, and so on. And think about Helen, as she is known now, Ellen O'Malley Camps. Helen came out of the Trinidad Theatre Workshop, which Louis is going to talk about later on in this program. And of course, you know, Trinidad Theatre Workshop is founded by Derek Walcott. It's and you know, a lot of there's that kind of that older generation of theatre artists, a lot of whom have passed away now. People like Errol Jones, Stanley Marshall, Wilbert Holder, Nigel Scott, Charles Applewhite, and Albert Laveau, who still is here, with us. Yeah, those were the people that came out of the Trinidad Theatre Workshop. So Helen was one of, from what I understand, the few women in Trinidad Theatre Workshop. Trinidad Theatre Workshop apparently was quite a male-heavy company. When she left Trinidad Theatre Workshop, she founded her company, Trinidad Theatre Productions. They used actually quite a few actors from the Trinidad Theatre Workshop in her productions. There's a famous production of Since Your Banzi Is Dead, featuring Errol Jones and Wilbert Holder, both deceased. She then went on to found Tent Theatre, which was literally a theatre in a tent. And it was in that piece of land just outside the zoo, Emperor Valley Zoo of all places, in Trinidad. And there was a particular generation of theatre artists pretty much coming out in the like really late 70s, 80s, 90s that came out of the tent theatre. People like Raymond Chukong, who with his company, Raymond Chukong Productions, really kind of like revolutionized a kind of marketing of theatre, really going for a wider audience than theatre saw in Trinidad before. People like the late Godfrey Seeley, who was one of the significant voices in contemporary theatre coming out of Trinidad, writing works such as One of Our Sons is Missing, Roll Call, Home Sweet Home, dealing with topics such as the AIDS epidemic, school delinquency, domestic violence. Famously, in production of Home Sweet Home, one of the actors, Heathcliff West, was arrested for pretty much cussing on stage because a police officer who was there invoked the Theatres and Dance Halls Ordinance, which famously dealt with it's historical, I should say historical because it's ancient as all hell. It's still on the books, still on the law books in Trinidad, where, the authorities can deem anything offensive and arrest performers for doing their job, for delivering the playwright's words. So yeah, people like Godfrey Seeley, people like Mervyn de Gouges and Christine Johnston, who brought out the Barras Company, which in the late 80s and early 90s did some really significant work. I mean, none of it local, really. I mean, all Western, American, British work. But they brought a sense of, design and production standards to theatre, to the commercial theatre anyway. Out of Barras as well too came people like Wendell Manwaring, Roger Roberts, who are two of the Three Canal Cut and Clear crew, who right now have their own theatre space. They have the Big Black Box, doing work with a lot of young people. They have their annual Three Canal show, and they did some really interesting work on the whole parkour movement. It's called Jump TT, and they did that a couple of years ago with the Royal National Theatre of Scotland, I believe, right? So people like Benny Gomes as well, who went on to be like the resident lighting designer of Central Bank Auditorium, which is another significant kind of traditional theater space in Trinidad and Tobago, right? And out of those guys also came kind of like a next wave of companies. Richard Raghubar Singh, RRRS Productions, Richard also being a significant voice in contemporary theater as well in Trinidad. America Dance, which, it's a commercial success. I mean, in a sense, you could say that play has been on 10 plus years running, on and off, of course, not, continuously. He also did wrote a play called Breaking of Lord Harris, and also people like Penelope Spencer. They brought out their own companies. Essentially production companies, but with a repertory feel that in a sense, kind of you can using the same actors all the time. But I would say, even though he did not come out of tent, a really amazing, significant voice in the theater in Trinidad and Tobago is Tony Hall, of course. I would say like the past 20, 25 years, with his Gina Diner, Miss Miles, Red House Fire, and of course, development of his Juve Popular theater process, which is a process that can be used by actors, that can be used by all theater practitioners, and having applications as well outside of theater to come to a truthful place in performance. So yeah, in a sense, you're seeing that kind of progression from the Trinidad Theatre Workshop, into the Tent Theatre, and from Tent Theatre, these companies, these production companies, the rise of commercial theater, and really kind of an expansion of the audience, a new kind of marketing of the theater, utilizing not just print, but television, radio, to really kind of get butts in seats in the theater. And as you talk about companies, one of the newest companies, which is now, we move from those private companies to a public company, as it were, which is the National Theatre Arts Company of Trinidad and Tobago. Its first director, Louis McWilliams, he directed the first production, and that company has come out from the Ministry of Community Development, Culture, and the Arts, which I think is now Ministry of Culture, Arts and Tourism, or something like that. Weird combination for a ministry, but hey. But actually, that was not the first iteration of a national company, a national theatre. The first iteration actually came out from the National Drama Association of Trinidad and Tobago. The National Drama Association was founded by James Lewa, who pretty much is the pillar, the foundation for theater coming out of the Southland of Trinidad and Tobago. James was a teacher at Naprima College, and I mean, out of James came people like Tony Hall and Dennis Hall and Ralph Mirage and Errol Sita-Hal, Errol Fabian, and James worked a lot as well with Horace James, who came out of South, and Horace went on to apply theater and drama to television, heading the first drama unit at Trinidad and Tobago Television, also known as TTT. James was also instrumental in setting up the Secondary Schools Drama Festival, which is actually older than the National Drama Association. It's the Secondary Schools Drama Association is, led, of course, first and founded by James Lewa and other significant people who have gone on to lead it. People like Victor Edwards, Anderson Labari, who really kind of expanded. Anderson was amazing. Anderson expanded the Secondary Schools Drama Festival in Trinidad to the Caribbean, to make it a Caribbean-wide secondary schools drama festival, which is going amazing from what I hear. And now, Secondary Schools Drama Associations led by Sean Smart, but that a lot of people who worked in the Secondary Schools Drama Festival went on to have careers. People like Donna Haddad, people like myself, and
Michael,
am I talking too much?
We're at 1 hour, and
okay. Well, let me just quickly talk about UTT AP, all right? Because I was kind of
and there's some really fascinating questions in the chat that I'd like to open up. So I know you guys agreed on a kind of order here, but,
right.
but I do want to give these questions some play.
Okay, cool.
So
real quick about UTT Academy for the Performing Arts. 10 years old. It's really practice centered. It has a conservatory philosophy. The acting program started by people like by Belinda Barnes, myself, Christine Menzies, who was Trinidadian trained at York, now at California State University. We all we had our different times in drama school. So we kind of set up something geared towards actor training. We've had, guest artists over the years, and really geared towards building a performing arts sector, and really more, I guess, fine-tuned careers in the arts. We're going through an iteration now where it's going to be more holistic. So not just silos of acting, dance, music, but really a combined BFA in performing arts. So really, carrying on the tradition, of arts training started by, UE Creative Arts, now DCFA, really started with stuff like UE Extramural Vacation School of the Arts, and also the actor training that happens in places like Trinidad Theatre Workshop, Necessary Arts, that really incorporate the training, the studio, the production, and company or companies, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Michelle, give you a chance.
Hi.
Do you have anything you speak to your view, your vantage point of it?
Sure. So I'm going to give kind of an overview of the development of theatre here in Barbados. Some of the earliest accounts go back to the 18th century. So of course, you're looking at a period of colonial power in Barbados, where a number of the players would have come at that point in time from either the US or England. And then we had a few local, what they called gentleman players that used to, stage various shows here. But aside from the visiting groups and the Europeans that were on island, it would be silly of me to think that that was the only theatre on the island. Of course, we would also have had forms of theatre outside of those more formal spaces, because our ancestors are oral tradition people, they're storytelling people, and certainly they would have had their own expressions among themselves. So we had theatre going back, I'd say going back that far, that is documented. I'm sure there would have been some forms of theatre, because where there is life, there is theatre, right? But coming into the 19th century, we had about maybe 8 theatre spaces in Barbados that have been identified. Some of them seating as many as 900 people. And we have no such theatre space in Barbados now, seating that number. We don't even see half of that really in our theatre spaces here now. What we had up to 900 people in the spaces back then. And in addition to those, I think there's one theatre that I want to highlight, which is the Garrison Amateur Theatre. And I'm highlighting that to bring it back up a little bit later. But 19th century, we had several theatre spaces. We had Albert Hall, the Theatre Royal, Wilhelmina Hall was the one that was seating like this mass amount of people. And then in 1922, I believe it is, the Empire Theatre in Barbados was built. And those of you who know Bridgetown at all, Empire itself is there, the structure is there. The ruins, I should say, of the theatre still is in Bridgetown. They used to have cinema, theatre, different types of shows happening there. Very popular theatre space. But I think historically in Barbados, we always had this kind of separation in theatre. So it was kind of like the European colonial kind of theatre, and then you would have had theatre by, the masses, right? And that was in an instance as well, even at the Empire Theatre to an extent. But as the 1940s came in, and certainly, we had Marcus Garvey, who would have been writing at that time. So there was a kind of a consciousness that was filtering through the Caribbean based on what was happening. I don't think any of us has ever really been insular. So we had in the 20th century, these theatres are being built again. The British Council in the 1940s was having theatre on their own premises. So we had a situation where they were also hosting production, but we also had the establishment of Queen's Park Theatre, and that was in the 1940s. That theatre seated about maybe 250 people. It would have been later renamed in 1990. Those of you who would have been here for Carrie Festa might have been to that theatre. It's now called Daphne Joseph Hackett Theatre in honor of one of our theatre stalwarts and educators here in Barbados, who's since passed on as well. But you also have in the 1940s, UWI publishing these extramural plays. And because they're publishing the plays are being distributed across the region. There's this growing sensitivity, I think, to what is happening in theatre on a regional basis. And that also filters down into Barbados. So there's this consciousness of, okay, how can we represent ourselves in the theatre? We're seeing it being done through the works that are coming out of certainly Trinidad, Jamaica, St. Lucia. And there was this growing consciousness of how can we do that here as well. And in the 1960s, we would have had the establishment of institutions like the Barbados Dance Theatre, which is predominantly a dance company, but they also produce dance dramas in their repertoire. We have the establishment of the Barbados Arts Council, which is now in the, I think, early 1980s, they would have become the National Cultural Foundation. Of course, we have also Baba Elombe Motley, who is writing quite significantly on Barbadian and Caribbean cultural practices, who's doing extensive research, who is still researching. you know, and he's constantly kind of revisiting and going back and saying, okay, let's unpick this, what was happening at that time. So you have all of those things happening. And there's this kind of growing focus because Elambe has established what was known as Yoruba Yard. So there's this kind of awareness now of let's explore our heritage, you know, coming from the African heritage. Of course, Barbados being only colonized by the British, we only had those two major groups here historically. Of course, we would have had the indigenous peoples before the colonizers came as well. But historically, during that kind of period of enslavement, those were the only two groups we had, the British and then the enslaved people. So Elambe is looking at the different practices that are happening, and he's saying, you know, all of these practices that are part of our cultural expression, it is also about who we are. It's not just performative. How does this inform our identity as a people? How do we now replicate this and include it in what we are offering, even in our work as cultural practitioners? And of course, him being the director of culture at the time also gave him somewhat of a louder voice, you know, to kind of get those points out. And coming out around that same time as Yoruba Yard, we would have had the Barbados Writers Workshop, which was founded by, I'm proud to say, my daddy, Anthony Hinkson, along with some others who were all trainee teachers at the time. And what he would have kind of decided at that point, you know, again, because there's such a heavy colonial presence in Barbados, a lot of the literature that we were reading would have been British literature, especially Shakespeare. And, you know, my dad and his colleagues said, you know what about our voices? Now, this is coming out of a time when they are also in the workshop having conversations with Kamal Brathwaite. And Baba Kamau is talking about nation language, and he's talking about giving validity to the way that we speak. And what they did in the workshop is that they decided that they were going to produce literature, plays and poetry. Initially, it was primarily poetry, and they expanded into plays. But they were going to produce this work that captured the Barbadian way of speaking, the Bajan way of speaking. So we are trying to produce, you know, standard English work. We're trying to produce work in our nation language. And that is what the Writers' Workshop was doing from its inception, right?
Allow me to stick a pin there, just in the interest of time, and try to get us more now into the work that we're doing and the dynamics at play, and to also allow for some of the questions and to go to you, Louis, with this question. Given that you're all engaged in programs where you found institutions to support a theater ecosystem, yes, right? And you've shared with us the evolution of theater in the region. But I guess I have a very practical question, which is, how are the students who are passing through the programs, and some of them are here, represented here, but how are the students passing through the programs faring in our societies in terms of finding livelihood with the skills in the marketplace that they have developed? They've devoted their time to mastering and developing. How is it translating from your point of view in terms of livelihood in the marketplace?
Right, I guess that's swinging to me. All right, so I'm happy that you pulled me away from going down the road of all the history, because the history of Trinidad Theatre, I mean, Michael would have done quite a bit. And if names come up now as we talk, but I mean, let's look at, as you question here, lives and livelihood, and based on what is happening at our institution at the CFA. All right. One, I mean, first things first, I have to give thanks to the person who had the vision to create this institution. Well, the two people, Mr. Roald Gibbons and Dr. Pattisman, who is deceased now, who has had that vision for what it is. And their vision was rooted in creating somewhat of the total theater artist. And I think so we started off with basically a certificate in theater arts, which at that time was meant to support the university who had their English literature students under Partisman and practitioners in the field who were doing work in the theater and not having that academic reference, academic qualifications. So that first year program was a combination of practitioners, people who were into the field already doing work. I was in that first group, and UE students. And the program was centered around really appreciating the Caribbean connection and the work. Yeah. And we have people like Leroy Clark, Pat Bishop, Ralph Campbell, a number of people in the early time, Wilbert Holder, doing work as practitioners with that. And the program began to grow from that certificate, moved into a practitioner certificate, where we began to get more specific, we began to specialize. In the department, when it was Creative Arts Center then, we started to add other disciplines to the thing. Music came, visual arts came, eventually dance came, carnival studies came, the technical theater program came. We began to develop degrees. And the students now began to have an appreciation for that all-round sense of Caribbean theater. So as somebody who graduates from the DCFA, not only graduate with performance skills, but you begin to understand the value of educative theater, the value of applied theater, the value of playwriting, being a playwright, being a stage manager, and all the options that are possible for somebody studying theater began to surface. And right now, I think in almost every institution across the Caribbean, you'll probably find somebody who would have graduated from DCFA. I know when you look at teachers in Trinidad, almost all the teachers would have graduated from them. So there is that work that is creating the holistic drama person. But then there, inside of that, rooted in us is that element of Caribbeanness. Yeah, where the focus you began to understand Royal Gibbon's vision for that third theater. We began to understand the value of festivals and cultural forms to the work that we create. Yeah, CXC came on board and kind of pull it together too, because they, in their CXC syllabus now, the value of cultural forms began to happen. And then when you begin to look at cultural forms, part of the work inside of DNA was not just taking the cultural forms on its superficial level, or its didactic or just performance level, but really breaking them down now to understand, how they can then be incorporated into the kind of work that we create, how the players become affected by the cultural forms, how people can use the performance forms to even train, work with Caribbean actors. And you dig deep and you break them down. So part of the thing now is our students beginning to appreciate what is theirs. At the university level too, because we at UE, students are now able to combine their theater with other skills, right? With other skills. People have to do theater and communications, study theaters and literatures in English, so that the scope for the theater student now became more. People did theater and film. With our disciplines, theater and visual arts, theater and dance, so that the theater student was not only limited to, let's say, acting skills, but we've created a broad brush through which students can then be thinking. One of the things that is trending now is the whole area of applied theater and theater in education, drama in education. And that work now is being taken all over the Caribbean. We have a number of people who have established their own companies that have taken you out. And all of our students throughout the years have found themselves into situations where they can contribute to the Caribbean theater landscape. And I also want to break to the point too, because sometimes when we look at the theater program, we forget sometimes the drama input, which doesn't need an audience, but which helps individuals develop as a tool for social development. The kind of work that we as a department would have done in terms of working in communities, in terms of going to communities and the work we've done with dealing with social issues, is also something that is lending to the kind of landscape that we're creating now in the theater. And people are being able to find it. I tell students, if you do an engineering degree, it doesn't mean you can just walk back and say, I'm going to get a job. We have to find those creative ways in the industries to move. Yeah. So that
Yeah.
when you look at even, I mean, we spread, just like Tobago, for instance, with their theater company, a group of graduates of the DCFA and Tobago practitioners get together, and they're doing phenomenal work in terms of the development and the pushing of the Caribbean theater. Another graduate of ours, Tabiti, with Tobago Theater Guild, doing the work. And what we find too in Trinidad now and Tobago is that there are some private institutions also that are doing that level of training, And I can't forget, I mean, a group like Necessary Arts, which we sometimes tend to forget, but through Penelope Spencer, they are also becoming a breeding ground for training for Caribbean practitioners. And if this panel is any sense of justification of kind of what has been happening, I think we can see it here. And anybody else could now help me and join in. And
well, I wanted to switch again. I know in my own country, theater has survived largely independent of the state. Going back to its earliest forms, and the major theater in the Bahamas, the Dundas Center, has not had government funding or support. It's just been so it's driven itself, right? And philanthropy has driven it. You are all at public institutions. I think they're all public institutions. I want to talk about the politics of theater, because politics, of course, is a very social form, a very political form. And I wonder how is, and I'll ask this to you first, Marvin. How are the institutions, how do they manage with the work that is theater? How do the institutions respond? Is there a political ambivalence or tension there with public funding going to something that might be testing or challenging the political status quo or challenging social convention, from your point of view? And then others might want to jump in.
Yeah, man. That's an important question. I think that perhaps the first thing to talk about with the state and theater is on the one hand to say thank you. We should be saying thank you wherever in the Caribbean governments make that kind of intervention and decide to support the work of arts institutions. At the same time, we also have a responsibility for the continuity of whatever that work is, to insist on government understanding their role in the state, in understanding their role inside of it. And it's based on a very simple logic. That is that we as small territories, most of us islands, right? We are always involved in conversations about economy and creative economy and orange economy and all kind of things, right? But one of the things that we don't pay attention to when we start conflating these ideas about where industry exists and how to get industry and so on and so on and so on, is that in those spaces where we take the models for industry from, there has been state support for perhaps hundreds of years. In fact, in the UK, that Arts Council, British Council Arts Council business that can aid and support arts and culture work, for example, which we sometimes want to borrow to set up the things that we want to set up in our own territories. The UK has a system that has supported work for almost 500 years, for as long as the Caribbean has been enslaved or colonized. That is to say, Shakespeare had support from the Crown. So that when we begin by talking about the economy and getting excited about what we could do as an industry and not talking about the fact that the state has a responsibility for the development of arts and culture, then that is a misplaced anxiety. That's the first thing. And the only way to advance that is for us to have conversations like these, where we put those things squarely on the table and advance the conversation. That's one. But it's a kind of oxymoron what I'm talking about here, or a kind of contradiction, because in very many ways, the artists who state-supported institutions or state-supported tertiary level institutions end up training, ultimately end up becoming entrepreneurs, because all artists essentially are. We talk a lot about creating entrepreneurs and training business people and so on, but the people who are really entrepreneurs are artists. Perhaps the only other people who are sports people. And the reason for that is you only really become a track or sports superstar if you win your race. And similarly, you only really become an important thespian if people like the work you do. Otherwise, we are the ones who consistently have to make sure that we take risk, go into the mess, which is what creativity is, distill it and make art. And in so doing, if people come to the work, then we can advance. We have to fail and try again. We are the only ones who really have to do that, right? So that when we talk about, I'm saying that it's a contradiction because on the one hand, it has to have state support to do what it has to do. But on the other hand, what it ought to produce and what it always does produce, every time it produces it well, it is based on the fact that the people who come out are always entrepreneurs. They take risks, right?
Yeah.
For all the people who we talking about graduating with business degrees and so on, we are the ones who take the risks. Okay, so when I say that, what am I pointing to? I'm pointing to the fact that, for example, when in Kingston right now, where the School of Drama is located, we could easily call it a cluster. That cluster, on the one side of the road has Edna Manley College. On the other side of the road, there is Little Theatre and Little Theatre. At the Little Theatre, the pantomime continues to try to work itself out. Not so much now because the COVID thing interfere with it. In the Little Theatre, Oliver and all of his line, right, making work. So till today, you have Basil Dawkins and the rest. Next door to the Little Theatre, you have the NDTC space where they rehearse every single week, right, for the last almost 50 something years, and producing work that is excellent. Because if they don't, the spaces will close down. That is who artists are.
Mm-hmm.
We have to produce the work and produce the work consistently. Just around the corner from us, right, we have Jambiz, center stage, where 30, almost 40 years ago, an old driving car park was taken, transformed, and somebody had the vision of foresight to believe that we could make theater in a space that was not a theater. Turns this space into a theater, takes risks, and continuously produced work, all right, of a high standard, right, for the Jamaican public. Now, the other thing that we have to talk about, apart from the business about the clusters and about seeing clusters, which in the excitement we don't always talk about as well, meaning our policymakers and so on. We don't always talk about them. Is that every Caribbean territory is perhaps unique in the way in which it develops industry or in the way in which it organizes itself as business and so on, right? Jamaica as island, as territory, is also a larger island, the larger of the English-speaking Caribbean, and also I think the most populous of the English-speaking Caribbean. What that means, and we were talking about this in our preliminary conversations, is that I'm from Trinidad, right? If I compare, for example, the way in which the commercial theater is organized in Jamaica, where those successes happen, because again, there are more artists per square mile than is perhaps good for us, because everybody ain't go be at the center of the commercial successes on the landscape, right? At 2 point something million people, everybody might not be, but there is work that is going to be meaningful regardless of whatever those commercial successes are. But I'm saying, however, where the commercial successes exist, for example, comparatively, it is possible in a place like Jamaica for a major commercial company to run work that could start at X point in the year and run it for 4 months. Like a play could actually run for 4 months. Because you could move it from outer Kingston, which has about 1 million people, almost as many people as living in Trinidad, and move it to the outlying areas. That is possible. That is like the Jambiz model, right? Center stage. And And then you would have other kinds of work. You have work that function, like Louis was suggesting, in those in the applied theater way, which is the work that I come out of. I come out of Arts in Action, right? That work is about locating theater in spaces that might not be theaters. Doing for their own benefit and development is experiencing it as or through theater or drama. What applied theater is about. That kind of work also happens here on the ground. And that is also at the center of what we could consider the industriousness of the theater community, if not its industry.
Mm.
Because again, not everything will be commercially successful, right? And then thirdly, we also have, and I suppose the equivalent of that here in Jamaica, to Ashe in Trinidad, to Arts in Action in Trinidad would probably be Ashe, a company called Ashe on the ground here in Jamaica, right? And then you have these companies that function like nurseries, right? They work as not-for-profits. They are insistent on playing with what they want to aestheticize in the theater, right? And they make time as theater companies, right, to organize the work that they do as theater, as art, and present it when they can. Perhaps the best example of that might be the work of Quilt in Jamaica, who I understand in the last two Carifestas formed much of the center of the attraction in what the theater, in what the theater productions might have that were presented in the last two Carifestas, right? Quilt Performing Arts Company, and I think the last work that they had that moved, that got some feedback in the region might be Reassured. The school is a center for that activity, not only because of where it is located in Kingston, but because when you have people who are young aspirants to theater making, whether they want to do that in their schools or they want to do that as actor, meaning the artist as artist or the artist as facilitator, because of the training they end up in our spaces, and because the school is centered geographically, but also in the linkages that each facilitator might have with any of those other spaces, commercial, community, or otherwise, what you find is that it is possible for graduates to make their way into some of those companies and or apprenticeships and or find internships there, right? Again, there will not be room for everybody.
Yeah.
Because one of the myths about work and industry is the suffering artist, not understanding that people in every other industry of the world will enter and not be successful all the time. That's also a fact.
True.
But we like to right? We're always talking about the suffering artist. It's rubbish.
Yes.
All of it is rubbish. There are failures in every industry, right? So
Yeah.
there's room for everybody to come,
Yeah.
and the extent to which you are willing to immerse yourself into the activity that you're engaged in, and fail and go again, and fail and go again, is the extent to which you arrive at your place, right? In
Yes.
the industry which you're located. Okay.
Thank you so much for that. Very, very engaging. Cantilia, let me ask you, how has COVID affected the work of the theater in your community and at your institution?
Well, like with everyone else, I think COVID, we had, of course, now we aren't able to physically get together and have rehearsals or perform. So again, like everybody else, that has been a major factor. But in St. Lucia, one of the things I found interesting that's happening, we've developed, and it's more with the younger generation, they have embraced the social media, the digital. And so more and more now I'm seeing, if you want to call them skits, you're seeing, a lot of small pieces coming up where they are finding ways to be very innovative with the technology to be able to still within this time create. Yeah, so that's one of the things that I have seen happen in terms of this. Another thing that has happened because of COVID is because now we've had, Marvin said something earlier on, we are entrepreneurs as, theater persons, we hustle a lot, we're always hustling, to kind of make things happen. COVID has made us slow down and kind of stop, and it's providing an opportunity to be reflective and to reconnect with other persons in the industry, which is important because as an artist, sometimes you need that moment to stop, think, where am I, what is going on, what is happening? And really then out of that will come definitely a new surge. That's my belief. Because I'm seeing the conversations happening, I'm hearing about the vibes in happening between various persons. That is extremely important. And so I'm excited to see what is going to be the next step, you know, because of that.
Thank you. I want to ask, I guess I want to ask this of Michelle. Is there, where are we in terms of gender in equality in the Caribbean theater? Do women hold an equal prominence and place, and what is it like for you as a woman in this space, and where do you see it headed?
I have to say that I have never had any challenges personally with my gender. My introduction to theater in secondary school was with Dr. Marcia Burrows. My introduction to official training in theater was with Dr. Yvonne Weeks. And certainly at St. Augustine, I had Dr. Danny Lindesey, who's here with us as well as Yvonne. And in the UK, I also had very strong female lecturers. So I've always been under the tutelage of some very strong, determined women. And I think that has very much kind of helped to shape who I am in terms of theater as well. So I have never had any experience of gender inequality. I'm not going to speak for anybody else because I think that's a very personal thing. What I will say is that here in Barbados, I think that we're quite on an even playing field. You will get instances, yes, of misogyny here and there. You will find that, but I don't think that it's that prevalent in Barbados. Our department, for instance, at the college has actually always been led by women, you know, and we may have our battles to fight, certainly in, you know, administrative discussions and whatnot, but I believe that we've always been respected based on our expertise. So I certainly didn't have that experience either in Trinidad. When I was living there, I didn't have that experience in the UK. That doesn't mean that it does not exist. It might just mean that the circles that I would have been running in kind of protected me from that experience, because I've always been in circles where the males who were in that circle. So at BCC, when I was a student, I had Roger Gittins. At St. Augustine, I would have had Louis, Raw, Marvin was there as one of my colleagues, Brendan was there. We've always had men that supported what the women were doing. I do think, however, that in terms of a community perspective, we certainly do have practitioners who are addressing issues related to gender roles. And it's not just a female thing, it's from both sides. So the last Carrie Festa in Trinidad, I know that there's a group in Barbados called Black Lagoon. They would have presented some issues on men's concerns, right? I know that Yvonne, for instance, does some work as well with the National Organization of Women, I believe it's called here. So we do have practitioners who are working within the gender field. I have to say that that's not my field of expertise. I specialize more so in heritage theater. So I work a lot with the Barbados Museum. We have not really attacked any gender-based pieces yet. Maybe it will happen, but not as yet.
Okay.
I want to, Ian, if I may, please, to trouble the gender question a little bit more too. That one of the things that we are conscious about the gender question in the work that we do at the school, and I suspect in different parts of the region too. And I'll explain some of the ways in which I've encountered it. And no, I'm not enfranchised to speak on gender, but I think I want to make the offering nonetheless. Okay? I'm not. It has to do with, one, the fact that, which is an undeniable fact, that insofar as the work in theater has traditionally privileged the playwright as the first, right? You know, just like I say, that theater is the bastard child of literature, right? Because the work in theater places the playwright first, and then every artist thereafter is an interpretive artist, interpreting the work of the playwright. You find that there are many plays that have been written, not only in the Caribbean, but the rest of the world, that have not been written for our women. There aren't very many roles for our women. That is a fact. There are, as a result, a couple of things that we have to speak to, and I'm not, one is roles. And one of the responses has been, for example, because the school, and in all our schools, I'm sure that is the same situation. More women enrolled men. I suspect that is also a fact, right? One of the ways in which the School of Drama has responded to that in its final year program, in its capstone program for the actors in particular. That program is based on the individual interrogating an area that she or he is curious about, and devising and creating a solo performance, a monodrama that is going to be assessed, where all of your theater competencies and training over the couple years are going to be assessed in this one show. You act in it, you devise it, you script, you direct, and you're advised by a lecturer, right? The same thing happens at UTT, right? That's the capstone. But that course was also written consciously, understanding that there aren't roles for a woman, and that if we created spaces for devising, which at any rate is the ethos of contemporary theater. Contemporary theater has decentered the playwright, right? It is now about making. Mm-hmm. And so you find that in that decentering, we have made spaces for our women to come to be the center of work that ought to be made about them. The other thing is that because we've done that, and if we examine any of the contexts anywhere in the region about work in particular that has to do with applied theater and popular theater, we will recognize that all of those spaces are gendered. All, from Arts in Action back to history, they are gendered spaces. And it has to do with the fact that there is a voice or a commentary on experiences, on lived experiences that might not have been making its way into the central and formal theaters. So Arts in Action begins with Dolly Moore talking about what is now called gender-based violence. In those days was domestic violence. And Sistren Theatre Collectives takes the experiences of inner city women, the broadness of all of their experiences, make that central to whatever theater they're going to make. And they've done so, and they did that successfully for a couple of years. Now we're talking free about popular theater. But if we go back to any of those spaces and we examine them, we would also find that those spaces are gendered spaces, because there are ways in which the men, for example, who are the playwrights, would have been writing for who they're writing for. And as any good theater, it has to be subversive. Those spaces also created, right, some powerful moments, right, to trouble some of those narratives and some of those practices, right? And I think that has to be said as part and parcel of our understanding of the Caribbean theater as a whole, right? And it was asked in the chat, so, you know.
Colleagues,
if I may as well, my apologies.
No, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, if I may as well. Again, I'm I don't have that privilege to speak to gender issues. But I think well, in Trinidad and Tobago, something that is not really talked about in theater companies, but happens in, I guess, a kind of tolerated way, is there's been an undocumented kind of predatorial history in companies and performing companies, passed off as having fun and so on, and is but and not just from a hetero perspective, but also a same-sex perspective as well, to a sort of harassment, a sexual harassment that that we don't really speak about, but has kind of given companies a sort of unspoken reputation as kind of like bring predatorial spaces rather than safe spaces, so that you would find and this is just from my experience as well, not only as a performer but an educator as well too, where you'd find that's being one of the reasons. I mean, apart from unsure economic gain in that particular field, of parents being very skittish about allowing their children to be in the performing arts, because I hear is it's a gay thing, or it's I hear every woman is get tackled in these companies, that kind of being in mindset, or one of the mindsets, kind of keeping kids from having that company experience, a performing company experience. So I think it's one of the things that has to be addressed. I mean, one of the most famous theater leaders coming out of Trinidad, well, Sunusha Rai, but having his doing most of his professional work in Trinidad, quite famously was accused by women outside of Trinidad, outside of the Caribbean, of kind of predatorial behavior, and that's something we have to address. That's something that safe space for everyone.
Yeah, guys, we are almost completely out of time, but I want to give each of you an opportunity. Just tell us what you're working on next. Each of you, 1 or 2 minutes. Let's start with you, Louis.
At this point, most of the work that I'm focusing now is work that is being done by students. I personally am not doing any directing. I mean, my focus for the last couple of years has been more administrative and teaching. And I am working at this point in terms of our students beginning to truly appreciate Caribbean performance and having a respect for it. And so that's one of the things that I'm working on in terms of building and in terms of developing training repertoire coming out of Caribbean forms, even in the way we warm up. Sometimes we want to warm up and we run to a Stanislavski warm up or a Grotowski warm up and not recognize that within the work that we have that potential to create warm-ups, training tools and things for students, right? And basically that's it. And with all, basically I'm teaching like 3 courses this semester, and they're all based on developing performance styles, believing in what you have and continuing that, and keep encouraging the work of Arts in Action, which falls under our department, because Arts in Action remains special to us. And that work in terms of applied theater has to continue. That work in terms of taking the theater to the community, using theater to empower social change is very strong in my agenda, the department's agenda.
Thank you so much.
And, yeah.
Quintilia?
Right now, what I'm working on, and I'm doing this with some of the other members on the panel, is that one of the things we've recognized, again, not just because of COVID, and I think this conversation is making us aware of it, the need to have access to information or discussions as to what's happened with us as Caribbean practitioners, an understanding of who we are, hearing from our elders, you know, those who've gone before us, what worked, what didn't work, what happened. I'm looking at the questions that are coming out and I'm saying, yeah, all of this, all very important questions. We need to ground ourselves to be able to, as you said, continue to develop and change some of the narratives that we have had developed so far. And in order to do that, as I said, and I'm using that word on purpose, it's important to have those groundings. And that's what we're working on right now. And I'm working on making sure that our students, our practitioners have access to these kind of conversations, to understanding the philosophy behind those who have made it and who have resisted some of the microaggressions out there, especially as women in this, you know, area, etc. And that's what we're looking at doing.
Thank you. Michelle?
Well, in addition to what Kentili would have just mentioned about the project that we're working on, my research focus right now is on intangible cultural heritage and theater. So I've been working on a lot of taking our history, our heritage, our stories here in Barbados and safeguarding them as forms of our intangible cultural heritage. That is the primary project that I have going right now. I do want to say, however, because I have read the comments in the chat, I have spoken to my experience in context to gender. I have not had that experience. I have not been in that space. I do want to thank the contributors in the chat for their perspectives, because that gives me, myself now, a broader understanding. There are things that I have not experienced. But certainly I think that moving forward, particularly as a playwright, I'm going to take that and, you know, be a little bit, I don't want to say a little bit more sensitive, but be more sensitive. Because like I said, there are issues that I have not faced. They've not come to me even in terms of these people that I've spoken to. In context of the type of work that I'm doing, gender has not featured. And so it is really quite interesting to hear the different perspectives, because that is something that I can certainly now look at in terms of developing my own practice as a researcher and a playwright. As I said, that simply, it was not in my work up to that point.
Understood. Appreciate that very much. Marvin?
Yeah, I think that the exercise of the time, I'm not talking about my personal research, but I want to talk what I think the exercise of the time is. The time that we're in, there are a couple of things peculiar to the time that we're in. One is that if we have a panel of 5 people here, and 4 of us were taught by one of the 5, then the time is a changing of guard, right? You have 5 people representing institutions, and one of the 5 is a teacher, and the next 4 are students. Then this moment is a time of changing of guard. In other words, there's a particular generation that is now assuming particular roles in different parts of the region, and there's work to be done. And so it raises the concern about continuity, right? What was for and how do we continue? That's part one. Part two is that apart from the anxiety for getting vaccines and so on for COVID, the lesson of COVID remains the decolonizing of institutions. If we have a pandemic that is threatening to all over the world to tell people don't come outside and hear the language as social distance, not physical distance. I've been fighting over that with some reading here and what it means when we say those things, social distance. And in spite of that, people insist on coming in the road to protest and to insist on the dismantling of systemic inequalities. Then the fear of COVID and the fear of death is not our concern. The vaccines and so on, that's not our concern. Our concern is the dismantling of those inequalities. And so everybody is now talking about decolonizing in different ways in the different institutions. if that decolonizing and that continuity is part and parcel of where we are, let's say those are at least two of the major strands of where we are, then there is work that we have to do in examining our various curricula and how we engage our young people and what we want of them. It means a serious reconsideration of some of them grand narratives that were packed into our curricula, right? It means examining and exploring ways of making our young people more ready and in an entrepreneurial way for futures that will come. And it also means looking backwards, connecting us with our various paths. It means also, because the gender question is still there, it means also attending to concept of gender, which is also part of the systemic inequalities that we have to attend, to which we have to attend. As a result of that, this conversation is only to whet everybody's appetite. This whole panel here is to whet everybody's appetite, whoever is tuning in. It is one part of the Blue Flamingo Festival, but at the same time, us saying to you that we're launching something. We're launching something, and something we're launching is called Emergence. Emergence is an online series where we're going to have Zoom conversations in theater with theater makers, with Caribbean theater makers. We are privileging ourselves because we have to talk to ourselves because we don't do it enough. It's a conversation about us and the work we do in theater and performance making. And we are doing it because we have the technology to do it, because COVID teaches we could do anything with Zoom, right? Every long time, March last year, we must catch up. March because the time is pushing us towards the use of the technology. So we're going to make the contact. And two, it is occasioned by one, the 100th birthday of Errol Hill. Errol Hill is 100 years this year. He's not here in the physical realm, but he's 100 years this year. It is occasioned by the Department of Creative and Festival Arts, which is going to be 35 years this year. And it is occasioned by the School of Drama at Edamani College, that is going to be 45 years this year. All birthdays are in August of this year. So everybody should tune in to August for when the real conversation get launched. And Caribbean people start talking to themselves about themselves, about what we're doing in performance and theater, right? Because the only way forward is for us to ground ourselves in what or who we are. The bigger project is called Groundings. It is a conversation with arts and culture people all over the region. The elders first, and then the contemporary makers and workers after. But the first phase of it is the conversations in theater. The first phase of it is the conversations in theater that is called Emergence, taking cue from Hill, Emergence of a National Drama in the West Indies. And that is coming to you in August. So everybody just tune in, we come in, right? And the conversation on aesthetics will be part of it, because that is the big question happening in the chat right now.
We're out of time.
Louis.
That's boom, yes.
We're out of time.
Michael.
I want to thank all of the participants. Michael, sorry, we're out of time. I want to thank you all for your contributions.
Okay.
Thank you all for your questions and your shares. And this is really something that should be ongoing. It's been an honor meeting all of you for the first time, and commend you for the work you're doing in our region. And I hope this won't be the last time we speak. It better not be. I'm telling myself it better not be. So again, thank you all so much. And that concludes our panel. And stick with Blue Flamingo. There's more to come. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And yes, keep looking out for Emergence.
Indeed,
yes.
Everybody give thanks.
Coming to you in August.
Connecting the Caribbean, connecting Caribbean theater, connecting
the official launch today.
Arts. Yep.
Thank you.
Give thanks, everybody. Give thanks.
Thanks.
All right.
More.
Hey, Kendall.
To all